Hey, I hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to the Davidson Hang podcast. This is episode 64 with Dr. Davia Shepherd, who is a master connector, speaker, author, retreat leader, and an optimal life coach. So, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Davidson. I'm so thrilled to be on your podcast and so grateful to be able to spend this time with a co-author of the book that we are about to publish.
Yes, I'm super excited. It was really touching to hear everyone's story, and I like Ryan's comparison to the modern chicken soup for the soul. I know I grew up reading that, and I was one of my highlights along my self-development journey was actually meeting Jack Canfield, and yeah, it seems like we have a lot of similar interests. How did you meet Liz?
So, you know, I I am a physician. My practice is in Bristol. That's like my day job. And so our practice is a member of the Central Connecticut Chamber of Commerce. And I met Liz when she was working with the United Way at the chamber.
Um,
So go way back.
yeah, that's awesome. Yes, Liz is great. We both met during a coaching program called Accomplishment Coaching. When we were Well, I was in the mentor coach program for a little bit, so that's how we got connected. But yeah, she's great. I'm so glad we're doing this project together, and yeah, would love to learn a little bit more about your background. You're doing a lot of really cool things with the ladies' power lunch, and then you also have your own practice, and then you also have um, yeah, it seems like you have a lot of really cool projects around like optimizing health and helping people become their best selves.
Yes, definitely a lot going on in my life. It's like every time I think I have enough projects going on, something else pops up on the horizon, and I'm like, yep, I've got to be a part of that. So, um, by day, I'm a mild-mannered holistic physician. I work in Bristol, Connecticut. We also have a practice in Farmington, Connecticut, and I help our patients basically to get rid of their pain. Mostly headache, neck pain, and back pain is what walks into our office. But we also see a lot of patients who have chronic diseases, and we help them to get a handle on that, because one of my firmest beliefs is that your diagnosis doesn't have to be your destiny. And so really and truly, I have a packed full schedule all day long, but then by night, I'm a superhero. No, just kidding. I also found that being a holistic physician is really a second career for me, because I started out on the other side of things. As far as medicine is concerned, I started out in pharmacology. I worked for big pharma for many, many years, and research my jam. That was, I envisioned someday being the person who comes up with this drug that's going to save the world, and you'll see my box on the TV, and with all the disclaimers, might I add. But after working for pharma for a while, I had a little bit of a crisis of conscience, and I ended up going back to school to learn how to be a holistic physician as opposed to being on the allopathic side of things. And so it's been an interesting transition, because now I am encouraging our patients that I used to encourage to take these meds. I'm encouraging them to consider a holistic option first. So that's interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean, so I was actually a community nutrition major in college, so I definitely understand like just the problems we have in Western society where we're over I think we're overusing drugs, right? I think combining like a 50-50 balance of like, yes, the great power of Western medicine, modern medicine, and also the more holistic, more mindful um, solutions that the Eastern philosophies have. So that's awesome that you're able to see that and make that transition.
I'm excited that we connected because we have so much in common. I also have a postdoc in clinical nutrition, so I'm really encouraging the people who walk in to see us that food is your medicine. So I get that connection with you because the 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 truth is, if you look at medicine where it is now compared to even just 50 years ago, the advances are tremendous. Medicine is fantastic, and I'm always going to recommend for a patient for whom that option is appropriate that they move in that direction. But I feel as though if you also look at the chronic conditions that are plaguing our society right now, most of them are lifestyle based. And so working with patients first to really look at their lifestyles and provide changes and opportunities in that regard is so priceless, and patients appreciate that so much. And so there is a place for all of these things, and I feel like because I've been on both sides, no knowledge is wasted. Because I've been on both sides of the fence on this, I offer a unique perspective to our patients and our clients in terms of medication as well as lifestyle choices.
Yeah, I do think there's something special about being able to see the other side, because I think it gives you a different perspective, and it shows you that you come from the more scientific knowledge, but then you also understand that some things just quite frankly can't be explained by science, right? Like, a lot, I think in America, we're all about the data and the facts and the scientific backings, but sometimes, like, I feel like the older I get, the more I'm like, well, there's this whole other world that seems to work just fine that, sometimes you just can't really put a number to it, you know?
Yeah, I love what you're saying about that because, and I think this is a little bit of what I talk about in my chapter of the book. The fact that if we had been having this conversation maybe 10, 15 years ago, the perspective that I would be having would be completely different. But that even over the last 10 years, certainly have seen a tremendous development in terms of my perspective, and also a tremendous development in terms of my own spirituality, and appreciating that there's so many different pieces that make up this world that we live in, and being able to embrace the whole is really, really a great opportunity. And during this time of COVID-19, which has caused many of us to go within, it's also been an opportunity for me to go within as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think that brings us to a perfect discussion about the Great Pause, the book that we're both involved with. Would love to hear about, the inspiration to, because you do have so many projects, right? You have a lot of stuff going on in your life. What made you want to take on an additional project, knowing that, your energy and your time is valuable?
Yes, my energy is valuable, Davidson, and also my time. And if you look at my schedule, my life is scheduled in 20-minute increments. I mean, everything is on the schedule, and I have a manager, and she tells me where to show up and what to be doing. And she's the best manager I've ever had, best boss I've ever had. Love her, love her, love her. She keeps me organized. So when people ask me, how can you be doing so many things? It's because I have help, and I have help to keep me organized and keep me on track and keep me focused. So I had certainly fallen in love with our publisher and co-author, Liz, many years ago, but we've stayed connected over the years because I also host a women's group called Ladies Power Lunch, and I need to find a new name for it, Davidson. So if you well, I need to call it something different. We'll always call it Ladies Power Lunch, but it has turned into more of a movement than a
Mm.
group. It's completely free. Before quarantine, we used to meet in person once a month free networking meetings just for any women who are in business in the area or who are visiting in the area to come get together and network with each other, always have that opportunity to support each other. Liz was a member of our women's group, and over the years, it's been 7 years now, we have grown from 6 women to a list of about 1,200 women and an extended reach of about 50,000 women. So it's turned more into a movement than just a group. It's a place where women can come together and support each other. And we only have one rule, and most of our members are either entrepreneurs or women with corporate oversight positions, or some are retired and they're mentors or that sort of thing. But for the most part, everybody is intentionally supporting everybody else. That's what everybody's all about as far as this group goes. And so Liz is a very active member of our group, and curating this group has taken time and energy, and we moved from having our summit in person to going online right at the beginning of COVID-19, when we all went into quarantine, and we moved all our monthly meetings from in person to online, and we added all this other stuff so that we could support our community during this a little bit more difficult than usual time. And Liz said to me while I was in the middle of all of this, plus keep in mind, I do have a full practice, and we remained open and remained full during this time because our state was very mindful of people with pain and asked all the physicians who treat patients with pain to remain open
Wow.
during the time so that those patients wouldn't end up in the emergency rooms, because obviously emergency rooms would be needed for patients with respiratory complaints. So during this time, I've been working every single day, and we've been really, really busy, because think about this. Everybody was super gardening. I don't know if you remember, but everybody was out there in a garden who'd never even gardened a day in their life. So they were coming in pain. Everybody was working from home. People were sitting on their beds with laptops, sitting on sofas with laptops, neck pain, back pain. Everybody was coming in. And so we were super busy. And then Liz says to me, we've got to do this book about the Great Pause. Basically, what lessons are we learning from COVID-19? And that was an invitation that I could not refuse, because this time has been really an education for me personally. We had our very own loss in our family. You know, I lost my father-in-law. My manager, who is the next dearest person to me, she lost her mom. So when I talk about things in my chapter, about the things that I learn and how wonderful this time of introspection has been for me, I don't want anybody to really think that I'm trying to sugarcoat a bad situation or put a happy face sticker on something that is potentially, life-threatening for people. But I really want us to see if we can get the nuggets of good that are coming from all that's happening right now.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? I think life is a part of a lot of extreme spectrums, right? So, I think you appreciate the good more when you experience truly the bad, right, and the worst. So I think if life was just medium all the time, then you wouldn't necessarily know what it's like to have all these great realizations, or obviously with the pandemic going on, it kind of gives you perspective, like, okay, like, like now we know what it's like when things are seemingly like going to hell, it's like it gives you a really good perspective on, what can happen in a matter of just like a few months.
And Davidson, I think I lost you there for a minute.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying I think it's interesting how so much has happened, but to your point, there's always takeaways from the good and the bad and the ugly.
Yes. And one of the things that I say in my chapter, or maybe, I don't know, I write so many things. I'm such a prolific writer. I have to try to remember, okay, what did I write in this thing and what did I write in this other thing? One of the things that I talk about a lot is that the times when I have grown the most or have learned the most or have felt like I've made a big transformation in my life that has been so positive and powerful, a lot of those times, it has been out of a time that has been a bit difficult. It has probably been a time that's been a more challenging time. And so for us to really look at all of these things as learning opportunities and learning moments, and to say, well, what did I learn from this? What did I gain from this? Was there anything positive that I could take away? I think that's perhaps a good way to approach anything that might appear on its surface to be negative.
Yeah, so you know you did lose someone really really close to you. Sorry for your loss. Would you,
Thank you.
if you're willing, would you be willing to share a little bit more about that experience and what that taught you?
Well, so my father-in-law, it was a very, very big surprise for us. I was in the office in the morning and my manager said to me that her mom was in the hospital because of COVID-19. Her mom had been in a recovery facility, which was also a nursing home, for something totally unrelated. And her mom was reasonably healthy for her age and what was going on with her. But she contracted COVID-19 when she was in recovery. And so she ended up in the hospital and she was there for about 2 weeks before she passed on. But on the day that my manager gave me the information about her mom, my husband called me at work and he said, it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, that his father had just gone into the hospital for COVID-19. By the time I got home in the afternoon, we got some updates and we felt like, okay, maybe he was in ICU, maybe he was gonna be put on a ventilator and maybe everything was gonna be okay. And by 8:30 that night, Davidson, he had passed away. He did have a coexisting condition, cardiovascular disease, and we believe that that helped push him over the edge a little bit faster. But what that really reminded me, and it's something that I really do try to live by, is that every day is precious, and making sure that we let the people in our lives know how important they are to us and giving them the time and importance that they deserve is truly truly important, and there's no substitute for that, because the only moment that we are guaranteed is this moment of now, and the moment that has the most power in all our lives is this moment of now. And so living in the now, it has been something that I have been, I would say, working on. It's an ongoing project for me, but this whole COVID-19 event has just brought this so much more into focus, and it's just a reminder for me. So I used to work before the pandemic 6 days a week, constantly at work, workaholic kind of person. And since this has been ongoing, we've taken Saturdays off the schedule. So you'll notice I'm actually at home. I'm not in my scrubs or anything like that. I'm actually at home and, with my family, spending that quality time. I think a lot of us during this pandemic time have had an opportunity to spend more time with our families and to get out in nature and just appreciate life a little bit more than we have been when we've been on that treadmill, that fast pace, going, going, going all the time.
Do you think it's are you Jamaican?
So my parents are Jamaican,
Oh,
so
okay.
you're probably hearing that accent. They moved us to Jamaica when I was very small, and so I went to high school in Jamaica. I did my undergraduate studies at University of the West Indies in Jamaica, and I also did my first graduate degree in Jamaica as well. So yes, there is a Jamaican accent there, but I was born in Trinidad, and I live in London with my parents for a while. So been everywhere in a way.
That yeah, very cultured. The reason I ask that is I hear that Caribbean culture is very work hard, be successful. A lot of the trainees I know and people that come from the Caribbean islands, I hear like you have to have at least like three jobs, and
Yes.
if you only have one degree, like you're a failure pretty much.
Completely. Yes, that is super true.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I think and I don't really know your background, but I think you probably know people from the Caribbean, or people who are immigrants, and the idea is that you work hard and that is going to be your ticket to success, and this is drilled into the mind of every single child of an immigrant. And so it probably explains why I have so many things going on now, even though really and truly, maybe there's an opportunity to cut back on some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I completely agree. My parents were immigrants. My mom was a refugee from the Vietnam War, and my dad also, the whole family, him and his 12 siblings, like all immigrated to the US. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like similar to you, like I literally block off like I do 30-minute increments, so not as intense as yours, but it's pretty bad. Like a lot of people who look at my calendar are like, dude, I had a panic attack just looking at your calendar. So I can definitely relate with you. So similarly, in the chapter in my book was all about how I was finally able to just like be with my partner, my fiance, and it's been great for our relationship because we've had a lot more conversations where before, like, I just didn't even I had to schedule time to just be with her. Like that's how bad it was. Like I feel like that's bad if you have to schedule time to be with your partner.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Like I said, before COVID-19, I was working 6 days a week. I would have to, if I have a 10-year-old and I also have a 5-year-old. And if one of them had a swim meet, the small one, he does swimming. If he had a swim meet, I had to schedule it in on a Saturday because Saturday's a work day for me. If my older one had a basketball or soccer tournament that I needed to attend, that had to be on the schedule. I had to schedule in my children. Think about that for a minute.
It's crazy, right? Because I do think like a lot of immigrant families, like I think some of the mindset, and I can't speak for all immigrants, but a lot of it's like working harder equals success. Where I
Yeah.
think sometimes like just being like prioritizing and just being like efficient, or just picking and choosing where you choose to prioritize is equally as important, right? So for me, like just scheduling time for myself so I can just relax and just meditate and just, you know, do things to source me. And that was like the hardest thing in the world for me. Like it would be hard for me. I'd be like, well, I have to answer these emails, or I have to like write this book or whatever, like all these excuses. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, all right, like if I can't even take 20 minutes to meditate, like that's probably a sign that I should meditate.
It's a sign, because you know what the gurus say: if you can't find time to meditate, you need meditation more than everybody else, clearly. And that was my situation. And it's interesting because you know how they say heal or heal yourself. I'm constantly talking to patients about taking the time and slowing down, and you know doing your personal care, and how all of this really affects the way that your body functions as well. But I'm not sure, Davidson, if I was taking my own advice as well as I could. And having this time, this space during the pandemic meant for me that I could actually expand my morning routine. So my meditation time, I was able to expand that because we started opening our office a little bit later in the mornings. I was able to expand my time for my yoga in the morning, expand my journaling, my meditation. I was also able to, because now I am not working on weekends and that sort of thing, I was able to perhaps streamline my practice a little bit more. Like you're talking about, be a little bit more efficient in the way that we're doing things. And I was able to prioritize not just myself, but also my family as well. And to make sure that weekend times are for family. I mentioned before my ladies power lunch group. I do this ladies lunch group out of just pure love. It is nothing but a passion project for me. I adore the women in this group, and they're also intentionally supporting each other. Everybody's like, what can I do to help you? What can I do to support your business? How can I move your mission forward? That's the attitude that everybody in that group is coming with. And so all day long, in between patients, in between chart notes, I am on our Ladies Lunch Facebook group and engaging with the women there. But I have now set myself some boundaries. And so somebody said to me the other day, one of our members said, you're on Facebook, in our Facebook group, commenting on everybody's posts, and you're so good at this. And I said to her, well, I want you to notice something though. You will not see me on the Facebook group before 7 a.m. and you will not see me on the Facebook group past 6:59, because I have set those boundaries. And what I usually get home at about 6:30 or so, because we finish with patients at 6. And once I'm home, that's family time now. So everything else gets shut down. And setting those boundaries has come as a result of taking this time for pause.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure your husband and your kids, your two kids, like appreciate that as well, right? Like
Absolutely. Yes.
to be present during dinner or, even at your kids' games, like, sporting events, right? I think
Yeah.
they notice if, you're paying attention and or if you're answering emails during it as well.
Yes. They know. They know. So it's great. It gives me it has given me an opportunity to really refocus, reprioritize. And please know, we miss my father-in-law so very much, but it's really just brought into focus what's really important. What's really important in life? What's important to you? And for me, it's going to be my patients, my family, my self-care. And those are the three things and my ladies lunch group, let's not forget that. And those are the four things that's where I am focusing my attention right now. If it falls outside of that, I have to give it consideration before I add it in.
So it sounds like saying no is a practice and setting boundaries was a practice. Do you think um I guess is it part of Caribbean culture to kind of be friendly and be able to like help out others, and because obviously like you're of service to people, right? Like your job being a coach, like your ladies power lunch, like you're always like helping people. Um so I guess like how do you practice saying no, and then just how do you practice being able to just focus just on four things? Because you do like a lot of things, like you're really into health and nutrition and wellness and meditation and yoga, like you are into a lot of different things. So how do you say no to something that maybe like is could be interesting, but you're like, I don't know if I necessarily like had the bandwidth for it right now.
Well, it's a case by case evaluation, I would say. Um, it's really, you really have to evaluate each thing individually. And so, for example, when Liz said to me, let's do this book, it wasn't on my agenda. It wasn't something that I was devoting time and resources to, but it was important enough for me to add that in. So maybe I should rephrase this and say that I have room for 5 things in my life, but the fifth thing is going to be the flexible option. And if the flexible option is filled, then I will have to say no to something else that is coming down the pipe. Because I, for example, was offered an opportunity to host my own podcast. And oh, believe me when I tell you, I've got opinions. Could fill 500 podcasts with all the things that I want to say to the world. But I said no to podcasting because I just don't I don't have the bandwidth to do that right now. And yet in saying no to it, I was also able to offer the opportunity to a whole other group of women who had that interest and who have that space. So to be able to say to the person who made the offer, I'm not able to do this right now, but I know these great women who would be such a great addition to what you're trying to put out into the world. And I think sometimes it's not what you say, but how you say it that makes all the difference. And so this woman will always be a part of our network because we have been so kind, and we have also been able to point her in a direction where she can be fulfilled with her desire, but it doesn't have to be through me directly.
Yeah, that really reminds me of Tim Ferriss's book, Tribe of Mentors. He talks about like one of the most valuable skills is how to respectfully like say no, but in a way that's empowering the person that's asking you to help you with the project.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the weird things that I'm into, Davidson, I don't know, have you ever heard of human design?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, so you know, like DISC and Myers-Briggs and those kinds of protocols that give you an idea about your personality type. This is giving you an idea about your personality type, but it's using, instead of asking you questions, it's using your birth information. So it's kind of tying in all the traditional personality profiling mechanisms with maybe a little bit of the woo-woo
Hmm.
sort of stuff. Anyway, um, it has come to my attention that I really do need to, more than others, manage my energy based on somebody doing this profile on me. And it also shows up that I'm really good at mentoring others and in that sort of way. And so it's great that I have this tribe of women, because people come and they ask me to do these projects and do these things, and I cannot always say yes, but I can always give them resources where they can connect with others every single time.
That's awesome. Yeah, I recently read a book called Tribe of Millionaires, and it's a really powerful book, and it talks about the power of community and holding each other accountable. And it was a really touching book, but essentially the story was that this guy found out his father died like unexpectedly, and then his father, he was so bitter and angry at his father that when he came to his funeral, he's like, "Oh, I'll just go because I have to. It's like my father." And then he discovered is his father created this tribe of millionaires of all these successful entrepreneurs, and they let him basically he was introduced, and then they all took him under his wing, and then they all mentored him, and basically he was lost and really bitter and angry at the world, but then he cried from joy because he realized like, wow, like his father like set aside this amazing community and has impacted like thousands and thousands of members, and it was like a really touching story, but it kind of reminded me of like, what you're creating right now with Ladies Power Lunch.
Yeah, Ladies Power Lunch is so near and dear to my heart. Though, like I said before, the one rule that we have in that group is ladies just support each other. And if you're thinking of something, just think, is it supportive to the group? And that's really all that we go by. People hang on to that. They find that to be so outstanding for them, and they are willing to support the others in the group, and the others are willing to support them, and perhaps it will eventually turn into a tribe of millionaires. I don't know. I I just do it for love. But I mean, if people are making money, sure, great, have at it, you know.
Yeah, and this is like a weird transition, but I definitely don't want to skirt over your partners. Like, what lesson or what um I guess like your partner's father, I guess like what lesson did you learn from like his presence and who he was for the world?
He, wow, you know, it's still a little bit fresh for us, but he was a great grandfather. If anybody's ever had the opportunity to spend time with their grandparents, please, please, please treasure that experience, because not everybody has that. And now I feel as though maybe my children, if there's one thing that I could take back, it would be to make sure that my children had more time
Hmm.
with him. Um, he definitely a very focused person, definitely a very family oriented person. And those are really qualities that those are qualities that stand out for sure. And I cannot say enough about how important grandparents are. I think, in perhaps also coming from that immigrant background, the extended family is really a very, very important part of the nuclear family. And just not being able to have that piece anymore it's a little bit heartbreaking, to be honest.
Yeah, I do think I'm not sure if this is like a like an American thing or like but I do think like in America the grandparents are sort of like because a lot I guess I can only speak for Asian culture, but a lot of the grandparents actually live with the kids a lot of times. Like live with them. And I think that's pretty rare in America, right? It's like, you go to a retirement home or assisted living's home and I'm not really sure what's better, right? Because I do think sometimes it's nice to have that freedom where you can just be like your own person, but then there's sometimes like there's a lack of connection between like the grandparents and the grandkids as if they, if you obviously if you lived with your grandparents, I'm sure, you know, by nature of just spending so much time together, you're closer, right? So I don't know, like I mean this is a pretty deep topic, but
No, I'm seeing the opportunities on both sides of that, Davidson, because the the fact of being able to have that freedom is certainly great. But then my mom lives with us. My personal father passed away years ago. My mom's retired now. So my mom, she comes and lives with us like 6 months out of the year, every year. She comes in the winter time, which is hilarious to everybody, because then in the summer she goes to Jamaica. It's sort of the reverse of what you would expect, but she's here in the winter because when there are early dismissals, or when there's snow days or things like that, she's here, and her help to us is invaluable. And then our children have gotten a chance to really get to know this grandmother. And my in-laws, they live just not too far down the street. And so they also have the opportunity to for us to be a very close-knit family. And I think they will always remember this when they're all grown up. They'll always remember the experiences that they were able to have with grandparents. And it's priceless. It's priceless, because you never know how long grandparents are going to be around for.
yeah, it's interesting because like I feel like as a child, at least for me, like when I was a child, I was so in my world that I was less curious as I am now about my grandparents, right? Like when I speak to my grandma, I ask her like all these questions about like what it was like in Vietnam, like, oh, tell me about your, when you owned a restaurant in Vietnam, like,
Mm.
and I feel like because they're always, she's such an amazing grandmother. She has a
Of course.
It's interesting how like it took me until after college or more recently where I'm like actually starting to like, oh, she has her own identity. Like, let's dig a little bit deeper, you know. But I don't know, like maybe when as a child, you know, at least for me, like I didn't really, I wasn't as interested in digging deeper, you know, that more complex layer of you know, like why you would come to America, like why did you leave Vietnam? So.
I think all children are exactly like that. I think all children only care about one thing. Are they loved by this grandparent? That's the only thing they care about, really. But then as you grow older, then they become not just a figure for providing love, but they also become, in your opinion, a person. I feel like my children probably look at me the same way. They don't care, you know, they care nothing about the patients that I see during the day. They have no interest in any of that. They want to know how me being present is affecting them personally. Little children are ego monsters. That's just how they are. It's fine.
That's a good point. Yeah, similarly, like when I was younger, I did not think about my mom as like I didn't really like, but now I'm like, oh wow, like my mom went through a lot, you know, like now I'm asking her about like, you know, what was like being on the boat for that as long as you have and stuff. And you're right, like when I was younger, all I cared about was like, hey mom, can you buy me these shoes? Can I go to my friend's house? Like, can you drive me to the movies? It's like yeah, there was very little like, hey mom, like what's your favorite part about what you do for a living, you know, or like tell me about your patients or you know, your people, your clients. Like I would never ask her about any of that.
It's interesting though, my 10-year-old, he has become a little bit more introspective. And I think I want to say that it's some of the things that I have been doing that are kind of rubbing off on him a little bit, because he'll ask me questions sometimes and it will make me think like, wow, you actually are interested. And the last book that I contributed to before this one that we're all doing together, Davidson, he actually read my chapter.
Oh,
I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. And so now that I was working on this one, because I did mention him, and I think maybe that's the reason he read it, because I mentioned him. And like I said, kids are ego monsters. So he wanted to know if I mentioned him also in this particular chapter that I did. I said, I think I may have mentioned you a little bit, but not as much as the last time. So then he had no interest in reading this one.
so the funny thing is it's still kind of ego driven, right? But
Yes, but at least now he knows a little bit more about me than he did before. So that's good. Some
uh
good came out of that.
that's awesome. Um I mean, I hear being a parent is probably one of the hardest things in the world because like there, you know, there's so many uncontrollable factors, but it's also one of the most rewarding things in the world. Um, so I guess, you know, I'm not a parent yet, but you know, obviously I want to be one day. Is there like, I guess, what advice would you give to someone who's, because a lot of my friends are starting to find like have their first child and you know, like entering that stage in life. I guess like what advice would you give to a brand new parent?
I can't look, man. I can't give anybody any advice about being a parent. Being a parent is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It's the best, and it's also the worst. It it's everything. I'm just being honest here.
Yeah.
You when you have your baby, you may not sleep. It's probably going to be an opportunity to learn how to do without sleep for a while. So enjoy all the sleep that you can now. But the day that you look at your baby for the first time, there there's nothing that is like that. It's it's almost a religious moment,
Wow.
perhaps. Yeah. So it's worth it, right?
Hmm.
It's worth it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think in American culture at least, like sometimes like we celebrate the individual, the ego like almost too much. So sometimes I think I mean, I think especially now, it's okay to like not even have kids, and like it's a you know some people would say like, oh, that's fine, like it's more accepted now, whereas I think like in immigrant culture, at least like in Asian culture, if you said like you're not gonna have kids, people would be like, what? Like that's so like who does that? So
It's the same in the Caribbean too, I would say. Yeah. You know what? I can give you advice, Davidson, because somebody gave me advice, and when she gave me advice, her name is Honorata, and she's amazing. She gave me advice, and I thought, oh my God, this is the worst advice ever. And it also turned out to be the best. These people, they're your children, they come to you. They come with their personalities already formed. They know who they are, and they are not an extension of you. And we tend to, as parents, think that they are, but they're not. And so you have one job, and that's just to teach them the best that you know and keep them safe. But at the end of the day, their decisions are theirs, their choices are theirs. And, just being respectful and supportive of that, even though they are children, that is important. And I am working on that.
hmm. Yeah, it, it's interesting. So, and I'm sure both of your children are so different from each other as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, I do think like keeping children safe is, or being a parent, keeping them safe is like biologically like what you're supposed to do, right? But what I think so, how do you like figure out how to like let them learn, like kind of fail and learn on their own versus you kind of like telling them, hey, this is what you're supposed to do. Because I think sometimes humans innately like just have to fail, right? So I feel like like my mom tells me all these things and I would like almost never listen to her until after it's happened. I'm like, oh, okay, I can see why she told me about this. But I don't.
So if you ever did your human design, I know you're probably going to be very curious and very inquisitive to find out what your design type is. But if you're the kind of person who you've got to make your own mistakes, you're probably a third line or a sixth line. I have one child that's a third line and one that's a sixth line. I have two of them. So they are going to have to make their own mistakes. I can't. I would so love to protect them, put them in bubble wrap and just protect them from everything in the world. But I can't. My 5-year-old, I say to him, don't touch the stove. And what does he do? He does this. And I said, don't touch the stove. And he said, I didn't touch it. But he's going to get as close as possible just to make sure that what I said was actually the truth. He's not going to take my word for it. And I mean, that's a really drastic example because we had to move him out of there really quickly to make sure he didn't get hurt. But you can't bubble wrap your kids. You're going to try to give them the best information possible. But at the end of the day, they are their own people. And so respecting that is important too.
Yeah, I'm definitely probably a 3 or 2. I mean 3 or 6. Like, yeah, I'm the type of person that's like, yeah, it's like don't do this. I'm like, oh, I'll show you I could do it, and I'll prove you wrong.
Yeah, I don't know if my son thought maybe he is a superhero and that touching the stove would affect everybody except for him. I don't know what was going on in his little baby mind, but I use that example all the time because it stands out so dramatically for me because I had to physically move him out of there because he wasn't going to take my word for it. No way, no how.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids, right?
Yeah.
What do you do? I can't even believe I have a 10-year-old. It feels like the time just went by really quickly. So
Wow. Yeah, it's one of my best friends says he has his baby shower today, and I'm like really excited for him.
oh, nice.
Yeah, and I think it's like I was at one point I didn't even think I would ever want to have kids because I was just so angry and bitter at the world. And then eventually after a lot of healing, I realized like, oh, okay, like that was just my stuff, you know? And then now I cry when I see like how much mothers like love their kids and going through self-development. Like you hear touching stories of mothers who would literally like take a bullet for their kids. And it's like, for me, like that concept was just so far-fetched. I'm like, really? Like you would die like that? Like why? Like wouldn't you want to, you know what I mean? Like it was hard for me to grasp that concept, but I think my mom would literally do that. She just offers like so much unconditional love. It's beautiful.
I think it's an opportunity for us to, and this is me getting woo woo again, and it's okay if I am, but I think when we have our children, it's an opportunity for us to, in a small way, appreciate the love of source, and just to, because you could talk about it all day long, but you would never really know about something until you experience it personally. And when you experience how much you love your child or your children, then you realize that the love that source has for you is even greater than that. And it really is a moment for real thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on, because I do think some people are scared to be woo-woo in like America, or at least in like the modern society sometimes, because people think like, oh, you need a hypothesis and you need to prove it with like experiments and whatnot. But I feel like the more like the older I get and the more I'm like, I feel like some of the most happiest people are like the most woo-woo, right? In the sense that it's like, they're just happy with just sitting still and like not necessarily, what I mean? And I'm like, man, like I wish I had that sometimes.
I think it could have been a TV show, or it could have been something like that, where there's this guy and he was just like lying in the grass and the rain was falling, and he was just looking at the raindrops and looking at the grass and just laughing uncontrollably. And people were looking at him like, oh, this guy is completely out of his tree. But he was having a moment of epiphany because he was just experiencing the beauty of the moment. It could have been a movie. Anyway, you got to read my chapter in the book, The Great Pause, because this is the stuff that I get into, and I talk about how, coming from a research background, if you got to show me the double-blind, multi-centered, controlled trials, you got to show me large enough sample sizes, you got to show me the biostatistical analysis for me to really, really believe that this is a true thing. And I talk a little bit in the book about my grandmother, again, back to the story of, grandparents, and just how they have an impact on your life, even if you don't, as a child, recognize it, because all you're caring about is just pour love into me, just pour love into me. But I talk a little bit about my grandmother, and I talk about how I, my personal experience with Source as a child, and how it was not really well received by my parents, but that my grandmother thought it was the best thing in the world. And she was the only person who really encouraged and cultivated that kind of belief system, so to speak. And then me putting that aside for many, many years, being very, very focused on research and medicine and that sort of thing. And then now coming full circle, and especially during this time, to embrace the parts of me that are woo woo, and to know that it doesn't mean that just because I have this woo side of my personality, that it takes anything away from my life as a clinician and my ability to see, treat, and diagnose patients, but actually that it enhances, in a way, my ability to connect with people as well. And can I give a shout out to one of our co-authors? So April Brown, she is also writing a chapter in our book, and she and I was a Saturday morning too, and it was during this pandemic time. And I was on the phone with her, and we were talking about my grandmother and my story that is in the book. And she was so kind. She made this for me, because my grandmother's favorite stone was the tiger's eye, and this is a tiger's eye stone, and it's wrapped with a tree of life. And she made this with her hands and sent it to me. So I just wanted to give her a little shout out. She is a jewelry maker, that's her profession, but the kindness of people, you know, and this wouldn't have happened, this connection that April and I made wouldn't have happened if I didn't embrace that woo-woo side of me. So there is a place, just like there's a place for the fact that I have this whole side of my life that was focused in allopathic medicine, and now I'm focused in a holistic way, and I combine them both to help my patients. It's sort of the same thing. I do have that side of me that's very logical, and yeah, I do still want to see the trials, really, really I do. But then I also have this part of me that believes in miracles and amazing things happening, because I see that happening in our practice every single day too.
Yeah, that's a really good. I There's a lot there that you just said. I think so. I recently started a therapist who she's also a Reiki healer, but she also has her master's was it like the social work, clinical social work. So
Mhm.
she has her degrees, but then she's also a Reiki healer, which I think you get more woo woo than that in my opinion. But she's incredible, like totally like gets me and like we connect on such a deep level. And I think to your point, it's beautiful when you're able to marriage the two because I think there's a time and a place where like all right, it's helpful to, you know, to be more analytical about things. And then there's also like just positive energy, just connecting with another human being and knowing that we're the same, you know, we come from the same thing, spirit and universe, whatever you call it.
Yes.
So,
Oh my goodness, Davidson, I just got chills when you said that. That hit me all the right ways. I mean, we have this mental construct that we are separate and we are different. And I think perhaps just in general society, not even just as America, but just society in general, globally, we seem to, for whatever reason, try to find ways to separate ourselves from each other or divide ourselves from each other. And even if you get into groups that look pretty much the same to an outsider, they've still figured out a way to differentiate themselves. And I'm even just talking about like being from the Caribbean.
mm,
My parents are Jamaican, but I am Trinidadian, right? And we like to, in our family, say, okay, well, I'm not Jamaican, I'm Trinidadian, and have that little differentiation. Whereas we're still the same family. It doesn't even matter, but we have to talk about that. And I just
mm,
wonder what it would be like if we were built the opposite way, if we were built to look more for the similarities instead of looking for the differences. And I don't know if it's psychologically built into us to do that so that groups protect each other from harsh environmental conditions, and if that's been hardwired into our DNA over the years. I don't know. I'm sure if you talk to an epidemiological psychologist, they could give you more information about that. But I think it's something to really study and consider, because if we could just figure out the truth that we're all the same. Oh my goodness, if aliens are looking down at us, they'd be wondering, what on earth are these people doing? They all look exactly the same to us, you know. If we could just figure that out, I think all the problems of the world would be solved in a moment.
mm.
Okay, I've just solved the world's problems. I think I can go take a nap now.
So that's a good summary. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we connected and had this beautiful conversation. Yeah, so many, like you said, so many similarities. Like I think both of our chapters are similar in so many ways, and I'm so glad that we connected. And I think a lot of people can relate, you know, especially like, you know, I work in Manhattan, and you know, anyone who's in the Northeast, I feel like can understand that it's okay to take care of yourself, to take time to be with family, and you know, kind of take time to ourselves to just relax and be able to prioritize our life. So thank you so much.
Davidson, I appreciate so much you having me on your show today. And I look forward to reading your chapter in full. And I look forward to many, many more just heartfelt conversations because I feel like we see eye to eye on so, so very much. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out. Like it's interesting how the world works, right? How like you just connect with people that have the same energy, and so I'm thankful for that. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day off.
Yes, I shall.
Take care.
Bye.